return, or providing their biometric data. In Kenya, the government rolled out the Huduma Number system, where, amongst other things, DNA and GPS data was supposed to be collected. The court did publish the rollout of this system, but they did put a stop to the collection of DNA and GPS data. We realized the implications of some of this information that's being collected. So our question is, where is it being stored? How is it being processed? And what are the implications on citizens themselves? So one of the roles that civil society has is one, building and generating advocacy efforts and educating, building digital or digitally aware citizens. So one of the we keep talking about during the discussions that were raised yesterday about digital economies. One of the core aspects of driving digital economies is data. So who's managing our data, where is it being stored, and how is it being processed? And I think central to this question is the question of trust. Do we trust the institutions who are storing our data? Do we trust the, not just public institutions, but also private institutions who are handling and processing and storing our data? Yes.
That is fantastic. And I think from the two panelists, we sort of understood the need for the grounding in law and then how it affects the citizens. But then maybe, Dino, what you can take us through is how then do you bring that understanding, which is crucial, of the citizen on these issues? What can you do to actually bring it to them? Are there any initiatives that we can carry out, or how do we bring this issue to the citizens so they can take note of it?
Well, thank you. Yeah, when actually that question came about, I was thinking of, the majority Tanzanians who actually are using, first of all, social media, or who are actually producing their data to authorities and to some other, persons, which actually is very normal here in Tanzania, as Sirius just said. So we actually are providing some data when actually as voter in the forthcoming elections. So every now and then, and currently we are actually proceeding with, the registration of SIM cards. What I see, first of all, is lack of awareness. So the majority of citizens actually do not know whether it's very important to protect their data. They actually do not know when they are just told you should actually come register, you should have to provide your name, your surname, your everything. Actually, they take it as very normal. You see, these are the authorities, and it's what we just said, the trust. So there is that natural trust in most of the citizens, the majority here, they are here in Tanzania. So when we actually tell them that this is your personal data, so there should be a mechanism to manage. There should be a mechanism to have power, to have authority on your data. That if it's provided, then you should have authority to demand whether after some time it's deleted or when you transferred, there should be some mechanism of managing it. So actually that's the major problem, and actually we can actually start, first of all, the initiative to encourage, to make these systems aware of, first of all, knowing that their data is very important, and actually they should have control of their data. I actually can see some of the civil society organizations actually working on, online freedom, on issues of data protection, the internet society, actually educating some of the citizens of the importance of their data, and that your data is very important. But still, because there's no actually law which governs, personal data protection and the privacy, sometimes it's very difficult, for this initiative actually to realize, because there's no actually some kind of law or regulation which, even these initiatives actually could base on. So sometimes, it's just when you have citizens, when you have people, and you tell them that that's your data. And sometimes because there's no regulation or law, there are some actually misconceptions. Some people actually actually have, they misinform some other people of their data and the products. So I think with this forum and in the presence of the internet society, I think with this discussion, we can come up with some strategies and how to involve some other civil service organizations, stakeholders, especially higher learning institutions, on how to make sure that at least citizens, first of all, become aware of the importance of their personal data, and if it's important even to protect their data. And then we come to championing the presence of the law.
And just to double click a little bit on what you said, do you think that there may be a cultural aspect to this in terms of people's almost laissez-faire attitude towards data protection? If you think about it, for a long time, women in the home would give the husbands everything. They would have their mobile phone, their passports, their IDs, everything is with them. And so we have almost this, as Africans, we may have this sort of feeling of the government knows best. Let them take everything. We don't need to know exactly what they're taking, why they're taking. What do you think about that the cultural aspect of that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, in Africa, there is culture of trust, and that's our tradition, that we are building trust in each other. And if the authority, and some of the Africans are very religious, so they trust that every authority is placed by God himself, so you should trust in the authority. So even if the authority tells you that you should bring your data and everything, you should respect them, should not question your authority, that why are you taking my data? It's actually my personal data. So I think, first of all, what we need, as I said, should make some initiatives to make these, people aware that, do you know where your data goes? Do you know where your data actually is stored? Do you know this data is capable of being transferred outside, your country, outside Tanzania? And if you are actually, the data is transferred, how are you sure that the data is managed properly without actually harming you or the plans to harm you? So first of all, we should make sure that we start, making these people aware that even if authorities, even if people need your data, should make sure that you question, should not put that trust, because that's your data, not the government's data. And we have actual processes of governments and authorities to make some data secrets that no one can actually even access them. We have some laws, for example, which restricts some data, especially government data, to be actually accessed. But there's no law to restrict some data, personal data, to be accessed. You see? So first of all, we should start, if the government actually have some laws to restrict the access to its data, some of the data, why not? We having the law to restrict some, personal data to be actually accessed by someone else. Yes.
And also, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think Deo is saying you should not respect religion, just in case people are up in arms here. But I think that just sticking on then the cultural point of how we are as Africans, how we grew up. All of these issues are coming up when the people who are now our children who are growing up in a very different age than we were growing up. I mean, the biggest things that we had to think about was protecting the stones that we had, gotten from the bush. But in terms of now how children are growing up today, their social media activity, their internet activity, Gloria, it would be interesting to see what your thoughts around how this all comes together, especially when it comes to children.
Thank you very much once again, George. First of all, I wanted to go back to the culture, the thing of the husbands giving the wives everything, and the phone. Right now, ask your husband to give you your phone and you tell me if he will allow you really access all the data that is available. So when we talk about data protection and culture, it's just that aside. Looking at the amount of data that is available out there, looking at the challenges that governments go through to protect their citizens online. while we may think, I know that the civil society comes in to make sure that everybody has the freedom of speech online, the freedom of everything, but sometimes the laws are needed to safeguard our children. Can you imagine if there is nothing that's protecting? Now this is the information age. Everybody is available online. Even the young ones, there is no regulation that's monitoring. So we need to be mindful and know that at the end of the day, we need regulations that can balance the equation of freedom of speech, abuse of cyber. I know we were discussing that we shouldn't, when we're talking about data protection and privacy, we should separate cyber security and cyber terrorism and all that. But at one time, they need to be brought together. So, with respect to protection and all that, we need to look at what can we do for our children. There's need to protect our children online. I'll give an example of what is happening in Uganda. While we are promoting computer usage, digital literacy in schools, strategies that we are sharing out there, and this is used in schools, in secondary schools, to make sure that you bring awareness, the teachers can bring awareness to the students while you're online. This is how it is. It is supposed to be. We do not believe in preventing kids from being online. We need to teach them to make sure they go online in a secure way so that they're aware of the dangers of what is happening online. And I know that in Uganda, we have a child protection national curriculum that have been developed. It also brings out the dangers of being online. We are bearing in mind that kids should be free to use gadgets, to use the internet for development of their careers, of their education systems, and even socializing at the end of the day. But they need to be protected by the line. So these are the partnerships that we do across. I know that Uganda Communications Commission, National IT Authority in Uganda, they have partners even with ISOC still in this awareness of protecting children.
This is now, I have two follow-up questions. The first one actually is for you, Gloria. What is the balance of liability to these internet sites or platforms compared to also parents? Does both play a role?
Yes, at the end of the day, you can never. We used to say that in Africa, the child was brought up by the whole community. Well, it is the same, it's true for our culture setting. Children cannot be brought up by the community of the internet. So it begins with us as parents. There is need for awareness. Really, it's the greatest challenge to balance. So while the teachers are doing the same, the parents have to take it up themselves to make sure that there are mechanisms. That's why we need those passwords. That's why we need limitations to know what your child is, what online, what are they looking at. So it's a balance between the teachers, the parents, and to know what exactly the kids are consuming while they're time.
And then just based on that, Siggy, Gloria mentioned something that perhaps she alluded to: freedom of expression is not absolute. What would you say to that?
That is absolutely correct. Freedom of expression is a limited right, so it's the right to privacy. But the limitations exist within a certain framework. So under some of the core international documentations, the restrictions that can be imposed on an individual's freedom of expression or even your ability to access information is threefold. So one, it must be provided by law. Secondly, it must be necessary. And thirdly, it must be proportionate, which means that when a government is taking a particular initiative to restrict information, does it satisfy? Is it proportionate essentially with that restriction which is being imposed on freedom of expression. And this argument is usually used in relation to the internet shutdown. You can't just arbitrarily shut down the internet of an entire region. It's not proportionate to the aims which are being proposed. Just to magnify the issue of rights being limited. So I think one core issue that we need to point out is that some of these rights, not some, actually freedom of expression, access to information, and the right to privacy are all mutually reinforcing rights. What do I mean by this? So in the context of, for example, a journalist who is gathering data on a particular corruption story, perhaps, in order to express themselves freely, in order to access information, they must necessarily balance their ability to write stories with the protection of the sources who are in whether it is generating data from. And so this is where the balance between rights comes in. And definitely, I definitely agree with that sentiment that rights are limited, but those limitations must be taken into context. Those limitations must be, you must adhere essentially to the prescribed limitations and limit rights in a rights protecting manner. Yeah.
If I can just double click again. So when you look at our regional laws, especially when it comes to access of information by governments, there's this fantastic threefold test that you talked about, right? And the first one being, is it by law? Now, we do know in Africa that we have governments who they will actually develop laws in order to bypass some of these international rules. What is your thought on that? One, basically, how then is the criteria that it has to be by law, but then people will question the laws that have been put in place and the motive as to why they've been put in place? How do you then balance that with the rest of the criteria?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, your question is how do you balance essentially the theory and the practice?
Well,
Can I have this question over something? Okay. How do you balance the law, the right, and the right to? First of all, you just need to understand what does the law say? Does the law give you the right to access that information? Does the law give government the right to access my information? And what is the level at which this access is granted? Am I notified that this is happening to my data? If it is not, if I'm not identified, then there is a breach somewhere. Really the law should stipulate that my right to consent to you, first of all, to accessing my data. I know that you're from Facebook. Sometimes you guys reserve the rights. The terms and conditions apply to us joining platform, which most of the users really don't. But that's why governments come. Facebook is collecting all this information, or this platform is collecting all this information. But is it in law? Is it bearing in mind the regulations that are also within the period at which the person should be collecting information and all that? So while it's difficult to balance, I think ultimately the person whose data is collected should be notified and should be stipulated in the law.
Dale, before you even continue, there's been lots of talk of the law. Tanzania has no law. So how do we actually proceed from that?
yeah, sure. So first of all, before actually talking of the the legal framework of actually data protection and privacy in Tanzania, I want to actually add some points on the question which you actually raised to Stevie, and the Glory actually came in to respond to that. That how do we balance the presence of the laws and what is actually happening? You know, we have a very good case which actually recently was decided by the East African Court of Justice on the Tanzania Media Services Act, which actually this entire test was very well explained. And actually, the case was actually filed by 600 organizations. Actually, my organization was one among them, to the East African Court of Justice. And the good thing is that the East African Court of Justice declared that, the Media Services Act of Tanzania, is against the treaty for the East African community and actually violating the constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania. What happened is that when discussing the filter test, the test of must be provided by the law. The court actually went beyond just being provided by the law. So the court actually said that the law should not only be there, that I make the law and then the law is here, then the law restricts some of the rights. So the court actually went far to even say, the provisions of that law should actually be clear. You see, because most of the African governments, when they come up with laws, you can find a certain provision is not clear. And, when the authorities interpret, to their favor, they say this is the true interpretation of this law. So the law should be clear. If anyone reads that provision, actually, you will understand clearly that provision means this way. Not like it's open for interpretation to, anyone. Also, the law should also be certain and it should not be ambiguous. That someone who actually reads that provision can come up with, you can amend with a question, what does this provision really mean? You see? So in terms of what is provided in the law, it should make sure that the law should be clear and ambiguous. That is, everyone could come up with the same interpretation as anyone else could read that provision. So at least that could reduce some kind of gaps, which actual authorities could use to interpret and restrict rights, which are actually provided by either the Constitution or some other guidelines or conventions. You see, I wanted to put more on that before coming to the framework which actually governs, data protection and privacy in Tanzania. Yes, it's true that Tanzania doesn't have comprehensive, law or regulation governing data protection and privacy. There are some reasons which actually might lead to this. First of all, our government is actually scared of, internet and, giving people that platform to discuss and share information. So sometimes, instead of actually bringing laws which, protect data, they bring laws which actually give them access, give the authorities access to the data, rather than actually coming up with regulations and laws to protect personal data. So that's actually the regime which we have in Tanzania and some other countries. Having said that, there are some pieces of legislation which some kind of, try to, to kind of protect, data which actually people can share either online or can share offline. So there are some laws which actually I just mentioned them. I'm not going to details, which actually Tanzania has enacted to the effect of protecting data, personal data, especially online and sometimes offline. You see, first of all, the Constitution provides for the right to privacy, and if it goes further to provide for the privacy of communication. You see, if you read Article 16 of the United Republic of Tanzania Constitution, so that provision is actually provided. And we know, if the provision of the law stipulates, and then there is no any law, which is actually acted, if the provision is not, it's like it's just existing and it doesn't have an effect, because you cannot go to the court actually saying that this provision of the Constitution has been violated. Because when we go to the court, we actually, file the case, against the government that it has not actually respected this right. What if a third party has violated that right? You cannot go to the court and rely on the constitutional rights which are provided. So that's the provision. Reading some other laws which are providing for the data protection. We have the Electronic and Post Communications Act of 2010, which actually imposes duty of confidentiality of information upon network service licensee operators. Actually, this is the law which is actually governed. It's actually used by the Tanzania Regulatory Communication Authority to actually regulate, network providers and the radio, the communication licensees, which actually are governed by the TCRA. So you can have also the Electronic and Post Communications Consumer Protection, which is actually also providing for some kind of rights. The Cyber Crimes Act of 2015 actually provides also for the protection of against illegal data interference. And we also have laws like, the Registration and Information of Persons Act, which actually provides some kind of protection to some data. But, the big gap which actually comes or actually happened here is that, the person whom actually his data is actually taken by the authority doesn't have the authority or that power to control the use and the even sharing or even storage of the data which authorities take. You see, because these laws actually provide protection of data against the, that person, third person's interference. You see, but it gives power to authorities to take data, and other persons, third parties are also actually, especially the, law enforcement agents, for example, they actually allowed, to take data. You see, so after the authorities have taken data, that person whom this data is taken doesn't have authority at all to control, doesn't have any hand, doesn't even have power to demand his data to be deleted. You see, so that's the problem which actually emanates from, the presence of these laws. We have some laws, pieces of legislation, but that person whom the data is taken doesn't have power at all. And actually, for example, if data is transferred, you see, from within the country to outside the country, that person doesn't have even other, power, or doesn't have even means to control that transfer of data, outside the country. You see, so basically we have some pieces of legislations, but they do not help at all because a person cannot have access to the data which is taken, cannot have access to the data, even the power to say, I demand my data after some time to be deleted, or I demand the control of my data. So the person doesn't have that power at all, you see. Yeah.
But he has spoken about the laws, some laws not being in place, but ultimately, data protection is for my own right as a individual. So when the law is in place, it is protecting me. Can you imagine, we collect bank accounts, we make payments, I know most of us did payments online when we're coming. We paid our tickets online, we paid our hotels online, we booked. Be party to a consortium of countries that have laws. For example, we are in East Africa is part of the AU, but how many of us are aware about the data protection, privacy, and the Malaba Convention in cyber security and data protection? Have we certified to that as countries? Right now, I know that the big discussion has been on the GDPR that has been introduced by the AU, and when it was introduced, everybody came back and plans to know so much charges are tagged to if somebody misuses the data of an EU citizen. But at the end of the day, it's protecting the rights of their citizens. So we may not have the laws in place, but there are laws that surround the consortium of countries with which we subscribe to that. For example, the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. It may not be necessary with data protection, but for those that misuse your data, just to be information. Thank you.
Thank you to the two of you, because that was very illuminating. And then I kept on hearing a lot of authorities. Authorities must do this. And it just seems that Gloria sitting at the Ministry of ICT, you're a busy lady, I know this. So this is an extra burden that has been put on you. So maybe Siki, is this why we need data protection authorities in our region?
Thank you, George. I just wanted to point out that yes, while there may be a patchwork of legislation at the national levels, but there are certain core rights. There are certain minimum rights. There are certain minimum rights protecting clauses that should necessarily be inserted into each data protection provisions. So there are definitely the principles of lawfulness. Consent must definitely be magnified as one of the core aspects. But just to go back to the question of data protection authorities. So there are 2 points that I want to make before I dive into this topic. One is that in order for us to achieve positive outcomes for individuals, we need to have positive action being taken by stakeholders, and not just by governments, but also by civil society organizations, by organizations such as Facebook. And the second point that I want to make is that different stakeholders have a very different role to play in collectively creating a trusted online ecosystem that operates to the benefit of each and every individual. So just to go back to the question on data protection authorities. Data protection authorities, where data protection legislation has been passed, play numerous roles. One is to ensure that the data protection laws are actually enforced. Secondly, is to increase legal certainty. Thirdly, is to investigate alleged violations of privacy. Fourth is to impose sanctions where applicable, and we have been seeing very many data protection commissioners, particularly in Europe and America, opting for the imposition of sanctions as a means of redressing a breach of privacy. Data protection authorities also have a role to work with other stakeholders as well as to liaise with other data protection authorities, especially in the case of cross-border data transfers. So I won't dive too deeply into the responsibilities of the data protection authorities. I'm sure you'll be able to magnify that. But just to point out, independence for data protection authorities should be not just a minimum, but it should be advocated for very fervently. Independence here meaning you're free from undue political, administrative, economic influence or pressure from outside bodies. So I know Uganda has set up its data protection office under the National Information Technology Authority. So one of the things that we've been pushing for in Kenya is, in terms of the independence of the Data Protection Commissioner, is when we're participating in the public consultation calls, we magnified that the regulatory authority should not be set up under a ministry, and it should not be set up under a regulatory body, because that for us is a sign of undue political influence being exercised. Now, one of the bodies that is responsible, the Commission on Administrative Justice, which is also the Office of the Ombudsman, had the same struggle. So, in order to protect access to information, it had to break away from this ministerial location. So that's one of the things that we've been pushing for in Kenya. In terms of how independence, what does independence for an actual data protection authority look like? So in terms of appointment, these are core questions that we need to ask ourselves. Who is appointing the Data Protection Commissioner? What is the constitution of the data protection body? So do you have multiple stakeholders having their voices being represented? Do you have civil society on board? Do you have government? Do you have private sector? Each being able to chip in. Do you have an oversight board that comprises of all of these multiple stakeholders? Yes, so I think I'll stop there with the data protection authorities conversation.
Before we take it to the floor, there have been some proposals that, let's say in Kenya, the Data Protection Authority should sit with the Human Rights Commission. Very controversial, but I would love to hear just 10 seconds of each of your thoughts on that.
Maybe I'll start off. So there were definitely proposals, and Article 19 was actually one of the organizations that advocated for the Data Protection Commission to be set up under the Kenya Human Rights Commission. But I think the more research we conducted, the more we came to realize that actually setting up a body that is independent from any particular stakeholder that is able to exercise undue influence on that particular regulatory body would be the best way to work. So while KHRC might provide a place for the regulatory body to be housed, I think for us the best option would be to push for a completely independent body that is detached from anybody or any institution.
I just want to pose a question before I answer the question. The Human Rights Commission that you think is independent, who does it report to? Does it stand alone in compiling all the reports? Exactly. They use the government to provide the information that is given. While it may be good at the human rights or the other way, they will definitely ultimately work with government to make sure that there is compliance. And so personally, I wouldn't think there's any problem where the body is set, the body is set, data protection authority is set, provided it works within the laws and govern the land.
So I think I'll just pull that conversation back. So I think what George was mentioning is that should it be housed within the Kenya? So in Kenya we have two institutions. We have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, which is affiliated with the government, and you have the Kenya Human Rights Commission, which is a non-governmental. It doesn't have any affiliations with the government. So I think that's where that conversation was going, and that's why for us we magnified that perhaps housing at the KHRC itself, which is a body that is distinct from the government, might be a plausible option in terms of the constitution of the office.
Yeah, so thanks that CG has come up with that clarification. I also had a knowledge of that in Kenya you have two different human rights commissions. So I think it will also, because normally these national human rights commissions are actually affiliated with the government. For example, in Tanzania, everything, including the appointments, including the budget and everything, you see, comes from the government. When you actually mention the Tanzania, the Commission for Human Rights and Good Governance in Tanzania. So I think with that, CG's comment, if actually it's housed within the CIPSAT organizations, the commission within the CIPSAT organization is okay. But sometimes it's somehow authoritative to also involve the commission, depending on the perception of the commission itself. For example, here in Tanzania, the actually outgoing chairperson of the Commission for Human Rights and Good Governance was somehow an activist. You see, he has actually been a commissioner to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. When actually give him some kind of idea like that, he would actually welcome that and he would participate. But the incoming, chairperson of the commissioners are not actually welcoming at all, because most of them are therefore, they are affiliated by the government and not affiliated by the social organizations. You see, so sometimes when you want to push for some kind of change, and you see there's no possibility actually to engage, people in the authority, you should actually work, on their side, and then you should just advise on how to actually, come up with some kind of focus strategy to involve them. Yeah.
Thank you, Dale. Now we want to take all these interesting issues to the floor. So maybe we can take questions in rounds of 2. Julius, please.
Yeah, I would simply want to make a comment. We talk of trust and trust and trust in the institutions that have our data and information. But I think we need to have a law, a strong set of systems in place that protect our information and no longer be unexpired. Because it's in the law that our rights can be granted. And you also asked, Gloria said, how do we balance the law and the practice? In my thinking, I think we don't need to balance the law and the practice. We simply need to practice the law. In an event that the law cannot be practiced, we simply need to do an amendment and have something that we can practice. Currently, I am looking at the broadcasting policy 2005 of Uganda because it has been taken over by the growth in the technology. So some section of it no longer applies. I'm also looking at the digital migration policy of 2011 of Uganda because it also requires an amendment. But before we do all this, we need to do a regulatory impact assessment because from the regulatory impact assessment, that's when we discover the discrepancy between the law and the practice and what to analyze.
And also, please introduce yourself so we all know who each other is. Yeah.
Okay, should I give it to him to introduce himself?
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Julius Peter. I work for me as a vice president.
Thank you so much, George, and the panelists. That is very interesting and very interesting discussion coming from the panel. I'd like to speak a bit about the independence of the Data Protection Commission and having been through having worked with the Senate and the Data Protection Task Force on the two data protection bills, we realize that the issue of independence is going to be one thing that you're going to trade for another, because all those options, like CD rightfully mentioned, have advantages and disadvantages. So if you house it in ombudsman or let's say human rights commission, the National Human Rights Commission is going to face challenges of funds, because these are institutions where government usually don't put funds in them. And I know that is almost following some depth in it. It has been it was enacted since 2016, Access to Information Act. Nothing much has been done to it because it's in the office of the ombudsman. It can only do as much. If you have it with KHRC, KHRC is not a government body. It can't implement anything. So that's also unknown. And then on independence still, you can't run away from the question of independence when you want that act to be, or the Data Protection Commission to be funded. Because the other model of it being funded was to actually get some fees from the data collectors and data processors. And we realize that we are going to have the data, the upcoming data economy, especially for small businesses. So that would mean we will come up with some tier of funding. And if you're getting big money from big players, that is also another mission of independence that is going to play out from the private sector. So it's actually a question that is going to force us to treat, like do a cost benefit analysis of all those options and choose which one is better. Yeah, and an important note for countries that are developing data protection policies is that we need to do a lot of work on the policy transition before the policies are enacted, because the concept of privacy keeps on changing, and even as it's understood by the judiciary and even the citizen it's very different. Like the last case even with the one number, when we were discussing previously, the government was telling us if you have nothing to hide, or if you have all those information about you, then why are you concerned about privacy? But there's no that understanding that privacy is also about a citizen or a data subject being able to control the information, correct the information, and determine who owns the information. So that's just a comment that we need to do a lot of work as stakeholders, not just the government, towards on the transition periods of our protection laws.
You didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. I am Liz Orengo from the Kenya ICT Action Network.
So, I have a question because there are terms that I think in this discussion as to where to house data protection authorities. We've been using the words commission, authority, independent. Maybe we can get from either the panel or from the floor an understanding of what each entails. If it's a commission, where does it have to sit? Does it have to sit within another body? Some authorities do sit under ministries. Then there are other authorities that are completely independent. And what does that take for complete independence? So if somebody could help us explain these three regimes.
I'm just going to ask, how many of the countries here have an equal opportunities commission? Equal opportunities commission. It works barely independent or it works very independent of all government institutions, or even the national SATs that have been put in place. They're independent of government ministries, so they're given the leeway to operate as quick as possible within the means that has been given to them under the rules and regulations that have been given. So governments, there is a possibility that government can really work, these institutions can work independently with it without interference of governments. Because we have, like example, these institutions are in place and their operation. Why would it be different for data protection authority?
Any other questions? Maybe we can take the two at the back.
Thank you so much. Well, my name is Alvin Sultaba from the university. Well, my question is about the issue of jurisdiction conflict, which it seems it is existing in data protection, where we found that we are discussing about data protection as the right of individual, as the right of any citizen, where you find at the same time the authorities of the governments, I mean all governments of East African community, have got a right to protect their data, all the records, the government records, and they have got also piece of legislations which normally are used to protect those data, out the data not to be taken especially when we come to the issue of Tanzania as hosting, we have got a law. No, sorry, we have got a bill which has been just saying without not passed by the parliament, or nobody is just enforcing it just to become a law. It's there, but I think the time has come now just to see what happened, not that to become a law to protect the private data and so on. But before finishing up, may I please just pose a question about the issue of jurisdiction in our countries, in this or not? As we see, we have got these 6 countries, but how do we really deal with the protection of data as general in these countries? Is there, and also with the alarming of sensations and the contradictions of ourselves when we are discussing about data protection in our countries? As well as we are going now to want to, as we said yesterday, want to be one and to protect our people especially where we find every day our data, every day the data are collected, every day the data are transferred, and once we go further to other nations, especially to big nations, they have got their way, their regulatory framework to protect their people with their data, and but in the same way we are doing this, the same this, we are doing the same marketing, we are making business together in e-commerce, in other different issues, but there are people who have protected. But how do we bring in ourselves with the African community? Please let us just discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself.
As I said, my name is Alvin Su from University.
And then let's go to the next question. But please make your question quite short because it's.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. The first question is that all of you have been talking about laws. We have laws that to our data protection, but we still see some personal information or phone call reports that are my personal information still leaks. Or people still publicizing my information. Do you think that people use this as a business? Steal someone's information and they sell? That's it. In my second question is that maybe they get to Mr. George, how do you act when a government or other institutions ask for someone personal information? Thank you.
Let's get two more questions.
Thank you. My name is Nelson Palangio from University of Eureka. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the nice presentation. Something that was spoken over there and I wanted to add before I ask the question. In coming up with the law and regulations on data protection and privacy, because I see many member states are yet to come with the law. I would advise that there should be a section, I don't know, part of the law that would right to be forgotten. I mean, it's something on data protection that could help those ones who maybe they are deceased or they leave the office. For example, who they are no longer participating in an organization whatsoever. There should be a law that gives the right to be forgotten. That I, for example, if I leave working at a certain institution, I can come back and demand the deleting and the removal of all the information about myself because they don't believe it happens to become a problem. That's right. Second, it's on the Tanzanian government side. The brother there explained a lot about the law. We have Electronic and Postal Communication Act, Electronic Taxation Act. We have Media Service Act and Cybercrime Act on issues of ICTs in media and in protections, issues of freedom of expression, etc. My question is, so far these laws have criminalized everything. I mean, if you see the provisions of all these laws, Media Service Act, Electronic Taxation, Cybercrime, and Electronic Post Communication Act, they impose rights and duties and obligations whereby once are infringed, it becomes a crime against the state. It's all in criminal law. I mean, some of the I don't know of the ICT or some of the offences that are committed on civil nature or on civil litigation. I mean, they don't improve for civil. I don't know. I mean, for example, like defamation has been criminalized. That illegal that interference, child pornography. Both can give rise to civil litigations. I can be defended and I can want some damages. I mean, for that. So it's a question. I mean, we criminalize everything in there. I mean, we should see on the other because of cyber crime, but there are cyber civil issues as well. I mean, that's the point. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can take the last question.
Thank you for the chance. My name is Diana Damson from the University of Eureka. I like the discussion, but I want to put a way forward or serious debate concerning how we can balance between the personal data, government, and authority. As East African Community Forum, today we are here. Let's have a serious debate on how we can have that authority or commission that will be total independent. If not 100%, but at least 80%. Because sometimes the government, I don't know the power of the government. Government is like a father, I can say so. And those who believe in politics, they know the power of the government. So how can the government to use the umbrella of public interest cannot use that umbrella to disappear personal data? Because as we are going on the economy, personal data is very serious issues in economic aspect and whatsoever. So let's take action. How can we go far to ensure that we have that authority that will be independent so as to ensure personal data is not infringed by the umbrella of public interest?
Thank you. Actually, I'd like to ask the question, if you were then in front of one of the presidents and you were told, what is your radical idea to making sure these authorities are independent, what would it be?
Thank you. As you see, the aspect of internet is not for a single person. It consists of different stakeholders. I will call upon those different stakeholders from all angles and to see how we can ensure that we have an independent forum concerning personal data. Yeah.
Thank you. So maybe we have a few minutes left, but we have many questions. So I will kindly ask the panelists to answer their particular question and then as well as give one last remark as we close. So Gloria, you'll be handling the question on jurisdiction, Siggy the question on data transfer outside our borders. There was a question on selling of data that maybe I can give to Deo to answer. I will be answering about government requests from Facebook, the right to be forgotten and deceased members, City can handle that. And then finally, it was about the criminalization of laws in Tanzania. So Dio, shall we start with you? And your last comment when you're done with all those questions.
Well, yeah, so starting with, there are some actually questions which I could also be, I could also respond to that, especially the process of making the data protection law in Tanzania. Actually, there's no bill. The bill was introduced since 2014, and I think it was dropped somewhere. It has not been introduced again to the parliament. So we cannot actually not consider a bill because the bill has to be debated and then it should be passed by the National Assembly. So I think you cannot call it a bill because if the bill actually stable and then dropped somewhere and then no progress, and then you cannot even consider it a bill. So that's why we even not talked about that. But I think it was this year during the SADC summit. We are actually chairing the SADC regional something currently with President Magufuli. So during the summit, actually I had one of the ministers, especially of the communications and infrastructure, talking of some kind of bringing back the bill. So till now I've not seen any progress. See, but hearing of him, you could actually sense what actually he meant. That's why when we are discussing that, when you talk of personal data protection in African countries, especially in Tanzania, you talk of government control. You see, cybersecurity control, that government control rather than protecting personal data. So that's the problem with most of the African governments. They just want to control rather than regulating and protecting. You see, so you can have that in your mind. Talking of criminalizing the right to privacy, yes, that is the other problem we have in our government, in our countries. Most of the laws which are enacted, because they actually meant to control, they criminalize because it is in criminal cases only when you actually find the government's in your hand. because actually criminal cases are handled by the government. So because the government wants to control each and everything, that's why it doesn't need to actually enact laws for private for private persons to go and litigate. That's why even each law, even criminal, even defamation has been criminalized, as we are saying. Even if you read the piece of legislation which I was just mentioning, they have criminal elements, and the bad thing that you can have one provision which actually matches some other provision of the other law, but the penalty is very different. You see, but the provision actually looks alike in more than one law. But you can find this law actually provide for this punishment, and this other law provide for this punishment. That's why we need one piece of legislation governing personal data protection. And I think when you actually conclude, George, you can talk of business entities and data protection, because you are actually concerned. I think we can talk of Facebook, we can talk of business, some kind of selling data and everything. But all in all, what I will actually need to add as I conclude, I think we should join hands, especially the Internet Society chapter, if NASA is here. And actually, I can see the academicians are here and civil society organizations. We can join hands, actually advocating for the data protection law in Tanzania. It is very possible because with efforts from civil society organizations, we have seen some kind of changes. The laws are being enacted, the laws are being changed in the course of law. So I think we just need to add some kind of efforts and actually commitment. So I think after this discussion, maybe the Internet Society chapter, the members of the academia and some social organizations who are here can actually come to strategize on how we go about actually reaching out the authorities so that at least we come up with this law. Because our partners, Kenya, for example, in Uganda, yes, we currently have laws actually governing data protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will attempt to answer Bin. Sorry if I've not pronounced your name right. Your question on jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is very key in data protection and privacy. So if a law that is on data protection and privacy is protecting the citizen, no matter where they are, you are a citizen of Uganda, the law in place is protecting you as a person. So if a data processor or is collecting personal data, I am the subject that is being collected on the data. So I would think that the jurisdiction should lie within the law or within the country in which that data protection and privacy law is from. So for the case of Uganda, I would believe that my country is protecting me. Whether your data processor in Tanzania processing my data, you're held accountable by the law. Well, it's a challenge in question, and the implementation of that is still yet to be seen. But I know that some laws, for example, the data protection and privacy of the EU member states, they are really working hard on that, and they yet to see that implementation. So hopefully I shed some light. Thank you. For my takeaway, I reserve the right to be forgotten. So as all data processors out there, leave me the right to be forgotten, including Facebook. Thank you.
So maybe then I can answer now those three questions. The first one in terms of the right to be forgotten on Facebook. Now I can say unequivocally that when you delete your account on Facebook, it gives you the options to completely delete all the data. Facebook will not hold it at all. So you can sleep very well knowing that your pictures from 2008 are not with us. Yes. And then secondly, I think there's an issue of a question of selling of data. And I think this is quite important because people do make a business of it. And I think that's why it's really important, number one, to have adequate laws on this. And then also for companies to be held responsible for these things. So for instance, this is issues more of when it comes to smaller businesses, how exactly are they obtaining the data? And it's a conversation that needs to be had with telcos and other particular organizations, tech companies. But I can then speak for Facebook, where right now the privacy settings and the privacy standard is so high that without your consent, no third party can actually access your data. Now, I can't speak for, of course, the whole of the industry. I can only speak for Facebook, but it is a conversation that's important, and that consent issue is very important. The final thing was on when governments request data from Facebook. Now, governments are allowed to request certain data from Facebook. We have a transparency report that comes out periodically. So every single request from government on your data is actually lodged in that report. And we can say, this government asked for XYZ. And when you find in that report, you would think that African countries request a lot of data. You find as you go into that report, it's not the case. Not many African countries are actually, governments are requesting for data. So it's a very interesting report, and I can send around the link for it. So you can go back to previous editions and just see, especially from your government, are they requesting any particular amounts of data? Yeah. And my takeaway is that the independence of data protection authorities is something we really need to think about a lot more. And I think it's something that it would be great to have a unified stand in terms of East Africa, so that we don't have one data protection authority sitting with the ombudsman, the other with the Ministry of ICT. I think we need a regional solution to this, so that as we are trying to encourage our SMEs to trade regionally, we have one regional way of compliance as opposed to an action.
Thank you, George. So I'll answer two questions. One is a question on cross-border data transfers, and the second question will touch a bit on the right to be forgotten, as well as the data of deceased persons, which is a topic that I am very passionate about. So regarding cross-border data transfers, can everyone in this room please echo the word consent? Guys, on three. 1, 2, 3. Consent. Thank you. So regarding cross-border data transfers, there are several challenges. One, as you pointed out, it is very important to have a legislative framework that governs how data will be transferred. We are seeing increasing drives in the East African community to harmonize processes, to harmonize policies, to harmonize regulation. And so perhaps some of these conversations need to be had. Countries also need to take regional efforts in terms of signing regional documents into consideration as well. One of the points that is pointed out in the Kenyan draft bill is that there must be security safeguards in place. So when data is being transferred from one country to another, are there security safeguards which have been put in place in the jurisdiction to which data is being transferred? And these are some of the considerations that either the entity transferring data has to take into consideration, and questions that also data protection authorities, if and when they are established, also look at. So that is my take on that, and also consent. Now going to the topic on the right to be forgotten and the data of deceased persons, I think it's very important to note that under data protection legislation, especially in Africa, the reference to this particular right is, so we often refer to data subjects have the right to either correct false and misleading data, or you have the right to delete false and misleading data. So it's very important to note the distinction between one, the right to erasure, and two, the right to de-indexing, which is what the right to be forgotten actually refers to. Now, de-indexing of web content in the privacy context refers to making certain data less readily available on online platforms. The European Union Court of Justice recently passed a judicial decision stating that the right to be forgotten does not apply outside of the European Union. So that's also something to take into consideration when you are lodging requests to entities such as Facebook and Google to have some of your information deleted permanently. Going back to the question of ownership of a deceased person's data, I think this is a very important question that we need to be taking into consideration. Now, most data protection provisions will not provide a specific clause stating when you pass away, you have the right to have your data erased, you have the right to have your data corrected, or providing for instances where an individual can handle your data. And it's very interesting to note that the GDPR under Recital 27 notes that member states should be responsible for handling, they should be responsible for setting out regulations and directions for the handling of deceased people's data. So 2 questions that we came across, and sorry I'm eating into time, is one, when you die, does your right to privacy, to data protection and to free expression, does that also pass away to deceased? Secondly, who inherits your digital assets, including your social media accounts, your emails? These are questions that we really need to be taking into consideration. So the German Constitutional Court, I believe, passed a decision. So there was a family that was trying to gain access to their daughter's social media platform. So the daughter, I think, committed suicide at the age of 15. So they were just trying to, dig back into some of her social media accounts to try and get an understanding of what led to her disease. And so the court actually stated your social media platforms constitute, sorry, one second, let me just get the correct terminology. They stated that her property, so they treated her digital personal data like physical property under inheritance law, and this was essentially in keeping with the sentiment that offline rights should apply online. Now in Kenya we have what is it called? We have an Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. So does this authority have the mandate to deal with non-financial digital assets? Right. So when we die, can we pass custodial rights to our next of kin over personal data that we have generated on social media platforms? I think these are questions that we really need to be asking. I know that we should first and foremost, as a point of reference, be pushing for the legislation and the enactment of our legislative frameworks. But this is also a very important question to take into consideration. So one of the instances that I like referring to is when you pass away and you have submitted some of your health data to a hospital, how are they able to keep generating and using and manipulating this information even after your decease? And what are the implications and ramifications of that? In Kenya, we saw an incident where a young lady was brutally murdered with her unborn child, allegedly by a governor. And the media, for purposes of sensationalization, really ran, they published a lot of personal data, not just about herself, but also about her children. So, these are the kind of conversations that I think and concerns that we need to start taking into account, because they don't just have implications on you after your decease, they also have implications on your next of kin, who continue living with the implications of the data being disclosed. So my take home, sorry for that very long rant, is one that the right to privacy and data protection are very fundamental rights. And for us as Article 19, they are fundamental because they are mutually reinforcing freedom of expression and access to information. And the second take home is that in order to sustain trust, and yesterday Barak had mentioned generating a data culture for the public good. In order to sustain trust in a data-driven economy, it is important for our member states, countries within the East African community, to acknowledge the role that personal data plays. So that's my take home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. The ability to claim digital assets, your social media platforms, both official and unofficial. Your family will have access to both of them. So thank you very much, the panelists. Thank you so much to the audience. This has been a lot of fun, and we can go on for the next hour. We are 10 minutes late, so I just want to hand over to Barak. Thank you so much.
We have our rainmaker. Or he has been rained on. Oh, Malik is the original. Yes, Malik.
also a new tradition. When there's such a fantastic panel, you want to bless them. And the Manyunyu is drizzle, so you go like, then you increase the speed for Boa. Then you do the full blessing. That was a fantastic panel deserving the Manyunyu and the Boa. Okay, so let's go for Manyunyu. No, we start by Pastor. Pastor to make ready. How the clouds are collected. Collect the clouds. Collect the Manyunyu drizzle. Ready to participate. Yes, Satu.
Thank you. Welcome for praise. Okay. As the panel takes a photo, tea is ready. Please let's take tea and be back by 11. Is it feasible? So that we keep time. We have about 20 minutes, so please let's have tea and be seated. The next panel is starting at exactly 11. So the moderator is Lilian. I hope you gather your panel members so that we start on time. Okay, we'll continue with the panel. It's now 11:15. We are 15 minutes behind schedule. In this session, we are going to discuss digital taxation in East Africa. We are going to look at the positive and negative effects of digital taxation. I'm stepping in for Lilian Nalwoga, and with me is a distinguished panel. I think I'll give them 2 minutes to first of all introduce or reintroduce themselves, your names, what you do, and then after that we'll have initial remarks on this subject of digital taxation in East Africa from each of you. I think I will start from my extreme left.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We just had coffee.
Yeah.
We should be more energetic than this. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Great. So I'm called Pagani. I am the Connectivity Policy Manager for Sub-Saharan Africa at Facebook, and it's a real pleasure and privilege to be here with you today. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eddie Kaihura. I'm an IT consultant in Rwanda, and I'm the board chair of FreeStar, which is managing the CTLT and the exchange from this private country.
Habari asubuhi. My name is Emmanuel Ndeka. I'm a senior lecturer in cyber security law and intellectual property at the Nelson Mandela Institute of Science and Technology. But I'm also an adjunct faculty member in the Faculty of Law LLM program of the University of Iringa. Those guys around you with t-shirts written University of Iringa have been my students in the past 2 semesters. So I'm very proud working with today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Quickly, Pagani, what is digital taxation? I think before we start, it's good we have a common understanding of what digital taxation is, and then we'll look at it in the context of the East African region. So what is digital taxation?
So thank you for that. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question, and I'm sure there might be members on this panel as well, the audience that might have better answer than me. But in my view, digital taxation relates to the taxation of ICT services, as well as the taxation of services that are delivered over ICT platforms. Basically, that's how I understand it. So it's twofold. Any services that relate to that are digital in nature, and the taxes around those services constitute digital taxation, but also services that are transacted over digital platforms as well. Any taxes that are paid on that also constitute digital taxation. That's my understanding.
Well, I just concur with what my colleague has said. I like to say that we have normal world that we've been used to, and we have also the digital world that is where we have an identity, we do shopping, we go to a lot of things in that space, and that space, like in the other worlds, the physical worlds, we have taxation in the physical world, so we also have the same in the digital world. Of course, there's this component of paying taxes online, which I believe is not exactly what you meant when you look at this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. In Tanzania, we have the Electronic Transactions Act, which avoids defining digital transactions, but collectively with other regulations, it actually implies that these taxes imposed for use of digital platforms for offering services or goods or intellectual property. So you can have taxes on music that is being transmitted online. You can have taxes for selling something, like you have a platform that provides goods that and the trade is being transacted online. And this is, like my colleague just said, it's taxes that has moved from the physical world to the digital world where the same services are offered.
Thank you very much, Dr. Getting back to the East African region, I know that recently in Kenya we had some proposals to introduce amendments to the finance bill, and basically these proposals seek to tax over-the-top services. When I say over-the-top services, I'm referring to the WhatsApp, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, those additional services that ride over the network. You know, most of us have phones. Primarily, the phone is supposed to be a communication gadget, whether you're sending emails with it or whether you're calling. But then there are additional services that sometimes are not necessarily charged the way the normal call is charged. So, and I believe this was borrowing from the trend that was seen in Uganda, where internet taxes were introduced. And I am reliably informed that in Tanzania there was a blogger's tax as well. I'm not really sure what's happening in Rwanda, Burundi, in Southern Sudan, but probably from the examples I've given, and I think I want to start with Fagani. Do you think we really have a digital economy in East Africa that we should start taxing or consider taxing?
Okay, so my view is this: as governments within the region, we should be looking at balancing two things. So government has its activities, its operations, and they require revenues for that. And a lot of these taxes are motivated by the drive to raise government revenues. But government also has a responsibility to enable economic growth, ensure that there's inclusiveness of the poorest of the poor in society, enabling job creation and all that. So in terms of the digital economy, in my view, it should be, government has to balance, does taxing the digital economy, what are the impacts vis-a-vis job creation, economic development for the nation, and inclusiveness of the poor, and balance that against its drive or its need for revenues. My understanding, when I look at the current the trends in the region, I think that balance hasn't been managed well. If we look at the Uganda OTT tax, for instance, it actually resulted in almost 5 million people stopping to use the internet altogether, following the introduction of that tax. The poorest people in Uganda stopped using the internet. So what does that do in terms of inclusiveness? People in Uganda, for instance, were using platforms to earn a living. How does that do with relation to the job creation aspect or angle or responsibility of government? And then when we balance that again with the revenues that government was trying to raise, the targets, they've actually missed the target altogether because people have actually stopped using the internet, so they're not paying the tax. Or even those that are paying, using the internet have found ways of bypassing paying the tax because they're using things like VPNs. If we look at Kenya's case, for instance, we're talking about the digital economy, but as much as that sector is growing, but I still think it hasn't reached the level where small and medium enterprises are able to pay the sort of taxes that the government of Kenya is projecting receiving. So again, we need to look at does the taxation of the digital economy of Kenya, how does that balance between creating or enabling small and medium enterprises to thrive versus the government gaining revenues from that? So I think I've addressed your question. In a nutshell, there is a digital economy, but I don't think government so far has managed the balance of ensuring or delivering public good versus getting to raise revenues. I think there's still a lot of progress to be done in that area.
Thank you very much. I will turn to Eddie, coming from one of the fastest developing countries in our region and working within a registry and internet exchange point environment where I believe you're trying to localize internet traffic and encourage uptake of local content. What is the impact of digital taxation on some of these plans that you're trying to do? Because I believe this affects the other East African states.
Thank you very much. First of all, I have not heard of any over-the-top tax in Rwanda. I know there's a lot of debate about that, and I hope it's not going to happen soon. It's not my call. And basically, I think this, as you say, when you look at the local context, even on the local content part, we have a lot of content that is being shared on exchange points coming from YouTube and Facebook. The caches that are there are the ones that are helping internet and better internet. We provide better experience because of that, and yet it's exactly the same companies that will be targeted by this kind of tax. I think that eventually, when we have grown this, when this has grown beyond the level where it is, because I believe that as it is now, we are still at a different level in our digital economy. And putting a lot of tax may have an impact that would choke the growth of this level. But on the other hand, I understand why government wants to do it, but I would prefer it's done the reverse way, because at the end of the day, this type of taxes go to the end user. So it's the end user who has to pay an additional fee. And yet the end user may not necessarily be making a lot of money out of it. And the people behind doing the advertisement on top of it are the ones making a lot of money. And if you want to look for someone to tax, there must be a way to find how to tax the one who's generating more with it. But again, it's quite difficult because they don't have a shop in the country, they don't have any registration in the country. But we should find ways to allow those who are making money out of it to be the one taxed. And again, when we look at them, it's only recently that I've started seeing some videos that are interrupted by commercials. So for quite some time, I doubt they were making a lot of money out of publicity in our market because our market was smarter. But I'm sure they must be having other ways to make money. But in a nutshell, tax, if we have to put it, let's tax the right person.
Thank you very much, Amy. I will turn to Daktari. Given that you are also playing in the legal space and with a focus on Tanzania, I think we've heard of the bloggers tax in Tanzania. And of course, I know Tanzania has had some very hot blogs. I don't know, I'm aware of, is it Jamii forums or something, sometimes very controversial issues that, of course, border on civil liberties. But nonetheless, do you feel this is the right way to create a balance in terms of what people should say or they shouldn't? Because it seems that the trend is actually to deal with civil liberties through the tax route.
Asante sana Barak. Maybe just a slight correction. The online content regulations 2018 imposed the registration fee for bloggers, people owning YouTube channels and stuff like that. And this doesn't qualify as taxation really. So the word taxation has been avoided, it's not tax. Because in Tanzania, the only authority competent to introduce a new tax or any form of taxation is the Ministry of Finance. And these regulations emanate from discussions by the Ministry of Communication. And so that is actually the registration fee. At the end of the day, they say like taxation because the money goes to the government, so legal jargon apart, we may only need to dig a bit further what my colleagues have said. Why tax the digital platform? Why do we go for those over-the-top services like WhatsApp and the like? Why? And how do we go about collecting that money? And from who? And the earlier we respond to those questions at the regional level, the better, because we will be having this kind of approach in Uganda, this kind of approach in Kenya, this kind of approach in Tanzania, which I'm sure is coming. And after that all confusion, it will be very difficult to kind of streamline. And in my opinion, there is a very delicate balance between over-the-top taxation and the infringement of the right to education, the right to information, and the right to entertainment. We see people are not using Facebook or YouTube or WhatsApp to get rich. These have been empowering tools that enable farmers to share information. You are in the shop and you send a picture of a dress you like to your colleague. These have not made anyone rich. However, governments all over the world, those who have done tax law, know for sure there is this joke in class that there are only two things which are certain, and these are death and tax. So you will always at some point be responsible to the taxman. We are all aware that the digital economy is a massive, it's huge elsewhere. The five you had technology used on the first day of the internet governance school, and you mentioned Facebook, Google. What are these? The big ones? Yeah, big tech. These are generating income. The biggest bookshop in the world now is owned by Amazon. The transport, all this Taxify, Airbnb, they are generating a lot of income. But that money does not come to Tanzania, doesn't go to Rwanda. So how can we assist our government to get
a piece of a cake out of that huge digital economy. What is our role in actually pointing the government's attention to the right guy who has money so that they avoid going to a journalism student running a blog? And collect just $50 and leave this huge guy in Texas in the downtown Manhattan making millions. As far as education is concerned, I have been following the trends in Uganda and other countries. I think if a case like this was brought to the East African Court of Justice, that taxing over the top services infringes some of these rights I've mentioned, that would have given us some way to start in trying to advise governments to go to the right guys so that the digital economy in Tanzania and other East African countries is left to grow without any interruption.
Thank you very much, Dr. Indeed, you are a teacher, stirring our imagination as to what we can do. I want to turn to the floor. I'm sure there are a few people that are burning with something to say. Anyone that wants to chip in or ask a question regarding this aspect of digital taxation? I see one hand. I see another hand at the back. I will take those two questions for now. So please introduce yourself and direct your question or comment.
Our microphones are not working, but I think I'm audible enough. I'm not getting worried. Court of Justice. I have a question. Here in Tanzania,
Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Court of Justice. In Tanzania, when you load airtime, whether by M-Pesa or by buying the card, they will take 18% of VAT. Is that part of digital taxation?
Yes, one more question at the back there, and then I will take Stevie. Do we have two or one? Please raise your hand properly. Yeah, see one.
Thank you. My name is Adam Matola from the University of Eureka. I've been a CT law student. My question was on what was raised by Dr. Valtaikas, on the sense that why don't we tax these companies that are not based in our countries? For instance, I read somewhere that the Kenya Revenue Authority is planning to introduce taxation system on digital apps. That is in the sense that apps that conduct businesses online. Now, in that sense, the same KRA taxes these applications, and at the same time, these applications in their respective states, or even in Kenya, and they pay taxes as well. Isn't this seen as double taxation, since they conduct businesses both online as well as offline? What is the take from the statement?
Thank you very much. Stevie?
Thank you, Barak. So two questions or comments. One is there is no global consensus on what taxation is. I mean, it's a very difficult one to find the value, determining value essentially within digital transactions. And what we're seeing certain regions doing is that, given the fact that there's no global consensus, specific regions are introducing interim measures. So France, for example, has introduced a 3% digital service tax on large corporations that accrue a certain amount of revenue within the French jurisdiction. So my question is, and I think, okay, so we submitted a joint submission with KitchenAid. And our concern with the proposals in the finance bill is that, one, the terminology is very vague. So what exactly are they taxing? Are they taxing cloud platforms? Are they taxing entities with physical presence in Kenya? At this point, I think I'm just rambling on. So I think those were mostly comments. My question is, what implication, and I'm not sure whether this has come up, does taxation have on freedom of expression? What implication does it have on entrepreneurship? What implications does it have for micro and small and medium-sized enterprises? Yes, that's my question.
Thank you very much, Sigi, for those questions. I'll be coming back for another round of questions, if you permit me, so that we don't lose direction. I'm reminded while we are at it, I think in July I was in Botswana, and I heard that they prefer to call taxation levies. So I don't know the Swahili term of the same. So it seems like it's the same thing, but we call it a number of other names. I don't know if levies are the same as taxation or what. I leave that to you, I'll come back. Let's have our panel, Tagani, if you can intervene any of the questions that have been raised.
Okay, so I'll address some of the points that stood out from the question. So yes, I don't know if we can call the VAT on airtime digital taxation, but it's definitely a taxation of the ICT sector. And when you consider good practices around taxation, or so the taxation experts have told me, is that you really want to have taxation that doesn't single out one particular sector. So a lot of the OTT taxations are actually singling out the ICT sector, and that in itself goes contrary to good practices around taxation. Also, have been told. The second bit around whether or not these taxations have an impact on things around entrepreneurship, freedom of expression. My response is yes, it does. Like if there's a case study on the Uganda tax, for instance, where they actually said poor people that used to leverage these OTT platforms to entrepreneurship have stopped using the internet altogether. We have this case study even going as far as estimating the missed GDP revenues due to this taxation, and they're saying about 400 billion Uganda shillings would have been lost, according to you, as a result of the OTT tax in Uganda. They're even estimating a loss of 2.8% in economic growth of GDP due to these taxation. So there's a study out there. I think it was done by Research ICT Solutions. I can't remember the authors of the study, but it's a study that has actually tried to evaluate the impacts of these taxes. So definitely these taxes have a negative impact on a range of things, including entrepreneurship, freedom of expression. And it's important to note that a good recommendation to our governments, now I'm thinking of a way forward, is before introducing such measures, it will be good to conduct an impact study. So I'm pretty positive that the government of Uganda, when they were coming up with these stats, they didn't anticipate such negative impacts in terms of loss in GDP growth or loss in general tax revenues. So I'll end my contribution there.
Some of these questions are really oriented to Daktari, the legal background for it. I'll not try those, but I was very interested to see what Steve said on France and the model they use, which I believe is the model that, in a way, I'm very curious to see how it really works, because I think because of the muscle that they can have visibility of how much the big tech are making in the jurisdiction. But if we start having this type of debates in East Africa today, I doubt that maybe in the report that George mentioned, that these are the requests they've put, but I doubt they'll answer the type of request at the level of maybe Africa also has different levels of growth in the market, but in the Kenya market and Tanzania have a lot of customers, but I doubt that we will easily have visibility. Of course, them knowing that the next step is going to be give us a portion of what you made out of us. I'm sure it will be a long debate. So the best, in my view, is to really allow these markets to grow. There's a word in French where you say, le fœtus en l'œuf, is giving a child when it's not even yet born. So I believe if we do this type of things now, we're just stopping and the growth of the internet, which is already not that. So I hope they listen and they follow.
Thank you,
Asante sana. Responding to my brother from the East African Court of Justice on the 18% VAT when you buy airtime or things like that. The way we distinguish in law, we have this new abbreviation called TMT. TMT law is technology, media, telecom, media, and technology law. These are very much related. So you may be paying for telecom services, and you should not be charged for media services. So to avoid the double taxation, one has to clearly distinguish between and see the interaction between those TMT arms. For example, telecom services are regarded as when you call someone, when you send an SMS. So that is what you pay for. Media, this includes adverts. If someone is doing an advertisement or something like that on YouTube, they also make money that is generated. It's different from the telecom services you pay, the 18%. And technology refers to platforms. If you are using somebody else's platform to make money, you don't qualify for exemption because you paid the 18% VAT for the telecom. It's a bit tricky, but my law students there will correct me if I made a kind of. So that the TMT is the way to go, and that's how you can claim that you've been double taxed or things like that. And Singhi's question is very important on effects or implications of over the top. Actually, I like to go there because you cannot avoid taxation wholesomely. You cannot say anything that taxes the digital economy is not accepted. No, that would be going too far. And the only query we have had in Tanzania, I know my brother from the Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition is here, and the voice from Jamii Forums and others, is that we go by this one-size-fits-all approach in the digital world. In the normal world, we say, okay, if you are employed and you are making less than 150,000, no taxes for you. But if you are employed and you are paid 2 million and above, you will pay, is it 30%? 30% pay as you earn, something like that. Why shouldn't we have the same parameters in the digital world and say, okay, these are just farmers using WhatsApp for really cheap things. They make money, insignificant. We are imposing the same rules we want to impose to a huge conglomerate media mogul to a farmer or a journalism student. So that has really been my concern. And it has had implications. For example, in Tanzania, we have at least 10 bloggers who have shut down when this registration was introduced. And as a result, it will cripple other areas of the economy and the communication and the right to expression and stuff.
Thank you very much, Dr. for those insights. I know there was a question from Deogracious. I would like to give you the floor now. If somebody has the microphone, I'm not sure which direction. Oh, please, Deogracious. Anybody else that wants to intervene in the audience? Yes, we have our colleague. Sorry. A follow-up question. So I'll take follow-up questions. No questions from ladies? Or you are still putting? All right, we'll have Deogracious. Thank you. Basically, it was not a question, but an additional point to what Malima has just said. So I've not heard of a direct taxation in internet use in Tanzania. So what we could actually equate it to direct taxation is the fees which Malima has just explained, and it kind of restricts some other kind of freedoms other than just internet freedom. For example, there is a scenario where you can find a journalism student, for example, she's actually still taking studies at a certain college or university. And journalism students normally do their practices when actually they open blogs, and their teachers actually encourage them to open blogs so that at least they can be posting, their assignments or their works, some kind of, field works, so that, at least people can familiarize of what, they are doing before going to the official employment. So, in case this lady opens the blog for the purposes of posting, just the assignments, so that at least people be familiar with the work she does. The laws and the regulations of Tanzania actually requires her or him to actually pay some kind of fee, and it's actually, considering the students. Most of the students depends on the loans from the higher education loans board. They are not paying actually salaries. So you can imagine the students having receiving loans. Some of them actually not actually receive, loans. So you actually restrict them from opening their blogs, so that at least they can be posting their, assignments, their work, so that at least people outside there and employers, familiarize with, the kind of works or assignments they do before they employ them. You see, so that's kind of a restriction to even education, which is a right provided in the Constitution, even employment, because it puts that in order that people out there can be actually familiar with the work. So I think it goes beyond restriction to freedom of expression. It goes beyond that. It restricts even freedom to education, the right to work and everything. So I just wanted to actually put on that it doesn't end on freedom of expression. So it has a lot of effects to the development of the person, especially students.
Thank you very much. And we have our brother at the back there. Any other person?
Thank you. Once again, my name is Adam Mazor from the University of Riga. Just to add up on what my colleague was saying, in actual fact, in Tanzania right now, the cost for a license is $930. So you can imagine, as he was saying, for a student who is studying in university or whatsoever, the cost of $930 in Tanzania shillings is quite a lot. And furthermore, one of the topics that we have been discussing so far is the issue of digital inclusion. And when you take in consideration the issue of digital taxation, it appears to be negatively impacting the poor rather than the major transnational corporations that we are talking about. Since digital taxation exacerbates the digital gender divide, since it pushes the better connectivity that we are trying to achieve far out of reach of millions, specifically the vulnerable groups, that is the women and people with disabilities. Since then there is this agenda that we are saying the internet should be accessible, available, and affordable to the all persons in Africa. So I was wondering, this is a question to the whole panel and the audience at large. What is your take on this? That the digital taxation seems to push the connectivity far out of the reach of millions.
A very good intervention. We have Lillian, and then I will have the panel to give their reflections on the
questions that have been made. You have something to say, Arnold? Okay, a follow-up. I have Lillian. I'm coming around because we have some good time to finish the issue. Lillian, please.
Thank you. Mine have been up and down, but I don't know whether it has been handled. But what I wanted to maybe seek clarification on when it comes to digital taxation, we know that yes, it may be good, it may be bad, but where we draw a balance, who should bear the tax burden? Especially if we are looking at the new services that the online world is offering. For instance, I'll give an example. I heard you mentioned how Amazon has made money. But right now, I would like to maybe throw it out there. It could have already been said. But we look like at a company like, say, Jumia. Okay? I order something online, it is delivered to me online, and I resell it. Who should bear the tax burden? Should be the service provider or the end user? Because once we understand that, then we can perhaps have a conversation on how much should be taxed or it should be left untaxed for the purposes of encouraging the services or trading online. The other thing is the issue of regulation. Do we feel that perhaps we need to change the way the current legislation or policies are to enable that, because it's a new challenge when it comes to, say, governments regulating goods online. They never anticipated it, and we still run on old laws. What kind of, do we need new legislation for that? Or there's already current legislation that can be used? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lillian. I will come to Arnold, then give my panel time to give their reflections on the question.
Thank you. Arnold again, Mr. Justice. My follow-up question on the tax and the answer from the third. You mentioned the services like YouTube, for example. That's why now I have some spots here. There are rumors here, and messages already been put in place that Tanzania is going to also tax people earning from YouTube, especially in the media, like the Diamond and all who have millions and receive money from YouTube. And I don't know whether it is a rumor or now a bill, I have no idea, but it's something really growing. Now, if you have already paid 18%, and then using the same airtime, I have internet, and then I upload on YouTube, and then you tax me again, is it a double taxation?
Asante sana. It's kind of tricky because I have mentioned telecom, media, technology. So imagining I'm the taxman, I say you have paid your 18% for your airtime, that is telecom. Then you upload a video, somebody pays you for the advertisement, that is media. So I tax you again on the media part. And so it's not double taxation. One would think so, but if you clearly go to the TMT division, it's a very legal tax that is coming, and I support it.
Thank you, Dr. I'll come back to the audience. I see Bob has something to say. Maybe I can have an intervention from Eddie and
After what Dr. said, I hope you know how to aim tomatoes. Make sure it goes on the side. For me, when I look at, yes, we're talking about tax, but I want to take it a bit further, because when I look at how I think we should be doing a lot to stimulate our internet instead of even blocking it. Back in the country, we've been having a huge debate on hosting locally, the cost of data centers in our country. You realize that even in terms of local content, in the time when you see the YouTube and Facebook trying to bring caches in countries, you still have newspapers and all these locally generated content hosted in America and Europe. Why? Because the type of cost they have outside is too low and doesn't make sense. You may bring patriotism or whatever language, apart from government who has to comply to certain law and making sure that the data is locally hosted, but we even failing to repatriate this type of content, which, if the prices were good, they would be in the country. So I think to go beyond taxation, taxation is just one of the road. Not just locally, you have to import them. So you have transport costs, you have sometimes taxes when there's no tax free. So in a way, we should stimulate this economy before we start making it.
Yes, so I think I'll just make a contribution and I might address the range of the issues raised. So when it comes to digital taxation, I think we need to take a step back at the role of government. So what is the role of government? Is it to raise revenues or is it to deliver public good? So if government is really sincerely committed to delivering public good and the digital, the internet, the digital economy is able to enable the delivery of that public good, why do you then go and tax it in a way that prevents the delivery of that public good? So government really needs to sit down and say, okay, what is our objective? Are we aiming at getting revenues? Then if that's the objective of government, then yeah, we can look for all types of taxes. But if it's about delivering public goods, then there are certain things that we shouldn't be even looking at taxing. The ICT sector, for instance, currently across Africa is heavily overtaxed. It's touched to the point where people can't reinvest and grow the sector. And we know the ICT sector is a multiplier. It's a development multiplier. And we have governments that have said, yes, we recognize that the internet improves lives, but we still come up with taxes that prevent people from using that internet to improve their lives. So I think that's where we need to start on the digital taxation. That's the starting point. Then what we also need to do is really understand the business models of the various companies that operate in this digital economy. So, like I mentioned yesterday, our business model at Facebook is advertisement. So irrespective of the billions of users we have on our platform, if people aren't paying to advertise something on our platform, we don't have money. So we might have however million of users in Uganda, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're making money. So we need to really recognize or understand the business model of the different segments within this digital economy. Then I would also say, around concerns of double taxation and global companies like Facebook, currently it's recognized globally that existing global taxation rules need to be revised, and there's a global process ongoing at the moment, led by the OECD. And I think just recently they've actually proposed a number of changes, and not to the global taxation rules. And Africa is part of that process. I think we have about 4 nations that are actually in the steering committee of that process. And for a company like Facebook or other multinationals, these are the rules that will enable us to pay fair taxes, to avoid issues around double taxation. So if our governments are active in that process and come up with measures that are not well thought out and eventually have unintended consequences of excluding people from the digital economy or even stifling the growth of the internet, then it's really an issue and a key concern for me. So what I'll say is let's try and take part in that global taxation discourse and ensure that we can advocate for
very much, Vargani. I'm really getting educated here. Seems that numbers don't really translate to money, but Kenyan politicians normally tell us that numbers don't lie. It seems the digital world and the physical world are extremes. Well,
this is a difficult topic anyway. Whether it's within government circles, whether it's within ITU, and I think the panel is saying some very salient points that we need to take note of. So I will go back a bit and raise a few things. First of all, what is the intention of this taxation? Is the intention to tax, as Daniel was saying, the OTT providers, and on the realization that we have no way of actually taxing them directly, we actually impose it on those who are using their services. Now, which has been the practical implementation of the case. Now, have we realized our intention? And was the intention merely to tax those providers? Interestingly, you saw, I can talk about Kenya, isn't it? That in the attempts of the government to reduce the cost of the cost of running government, one of the things they have proposed is that they should be doing more calls using voice over internet services, so that they reduce on the cost of voice, text. And on the other side, they would want to, tax whoever is using those services. AM is saying, should we not grow the sector, stimulate the sector before we start harvesting? So I asked ourselves, what is the intention? What are we trying to achieve? Or are we just taxing because we think the numbers, as Ferdinand says, will translate to the numbers that we are looking? So who should actually pay that tax? I think that question will be answered. And I'm surprised many years down the line, after struggling with this idea of whether it should be taxed and good practice, not a proper impact assessment, as Ferdinand was saying, has actually been carried out at a national level or at a regional level as far as Africa is concerned. What is the best practice if we want Facebook, for example, or Google to pay a tax? And I'm sure if it is justifiable, they will pay. So there has to be a process of actually demonstrating that this is the way to pay your fair share of the tax. I'm sure they will pay. But that has not been done. Now, what we have ended up doing is actually taxing me and you, who doesn't even know who Facebook is. I just happen to be using it. So the governments have been very unfair, from where I see it, to their citizens, because they are targeting the wrong person in the effort to attempt to fight another person. Most of the time, we talk about this as punishment. In other quarters, I've had, well, social media is for gossip. So if you want to use it, you will pay. Interestingly, the same people are actively using the same word. I wonder if they're gossiping, but don't worry. So are we doing this to punish, or really we want to, raise revenue? Is it a way of punishment? Is that the motivation? So that's why a proper study, a balanced study with the right people in the room, the right sectors in the room, to actually come up with something that makes sense. And I can assure you, even Facebook and the other providers will comply. But as it is now, it's like fumbling in the dark. We are trying to walk with our eyes wide open, but we're in the dark. So we think that the best way to raise this amount of money is to tax platforms with this number of users, which should translate directly to this amount of money. And Uganda has proven that it is not actually the same. It doesn't translate the same. So it's difficult for me, but I think we need to do a proper impact assessment with the intention to raise the document that is a standard. And whose intention is not to control. And the only way to do that is to make sure that you have the right people in the room and stimulate a proper debate.
Thank you very much, Bob, for those insights. I see a hand. Please introduce yourself, sir, and then we'll have Robert. I think I have a lady there. Then I'll come back to my panel to close this session. Please, sir, I will start with you. Please pass the mic next to the door.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Jonathan, Assistant Principal Customs Officer, IT. Now, there are a lot of, based on the discussion that has been going on, I think we are trying to mix the technologies, and I think that's the same problem maybe with the government face. There are taxes and also fees. Now, when you are saying that to register, for example, a blog, you need to pay this amount of money. That is a fee. Now, there are always intentions behind some of these government policies. At times, things are introduced for purposes of prohibiting certain activities which are not necessarily meant to, it's not actually tax per se, because you cannot ask somebody to pay the tax in advance before earning. Now, when it comes to OTT, I think that's where now we need to go to what the suggestions that have been coming at it. The government, I think we need to sit down together with stakeholders and try to understand what they are trying to tax, the dynamics. The reason why OTT did perform well from the taxation point of view, it was assured that I think it was based on the total number of registered SIM cards, and they make the computations of estimates. And technically, it doesn't work like that. You have 3 phones, I can roll internet from one, and here. I'm based in Tanzania, I'm Ugandan, I have Uganda line here, I'm using Wi-Fi also. So my line is done, it's among those on that based on estimation of OTT. I only put OTT when I'm in Uganda. But my line is active, I use it for calling, but I don't improve internet. So what I'm saying here that maybe to what is going to come out of this meeting, that there's need for policymakers to sit with all stakeholders to understand, because what I tax it. Now, in customs, we are looking at encouraging electronic commerce. Now, most of these items bought electronically, they translate into physical goods. I buy it come over the internet, but eventually it has to pay customs tax. Now, this is what tax policymakers need to understand. What do they want? Is this thing of the egg and chicken and what? Chicken and the egg. What you are you prohibiting increase of importations so that you use of customs duties? Now, these are some of the challenges that we have. Right? So, I think what needs to be done is really to understand. When you come up with a fee, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to encourage technology, or the fees aimed at controlling other issues beyond technology? So those are my observations.
Thank you very much. I think we couldn't have heard from a better source, customs person. Yes, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to know if someone is taking notes of what is being discussed here. Well, I think these are interesting conversations to be listened to by people who impose these taxes. Discussing these items in this room, and we go away without having people who document them so that they can reach the right ears to probably understand what the region is thinking, what the right thing. I'm a strong advocate of regional integration, but which is powered by technology. Because technology has come up so strongly that sometimes it even transcends the kind of regulations that we set up for whatever reasons, like Bob was talking about. When we look at taxation, it's interesting and at the same time sad that those who impose the taxes, which are our government, have made limited investments in these technologies. Companies have come and spent lots of money in putting up this infrastructure that enables us to communicate and access knowledge and information with very limited or little investment from government at all, apart from signatures on contracts. That's what they do. And from the day you set up office as a telecom company providing these services, you begin paying taxes. You're already paying tax. Now, your revenues are coming from people who are using the service. So when you go to tax those people, as a telecom company, I should take you to court. Actually, I should sue you as a government because you're constraining my revenue source, and my contract is saying I'm coming here and I'm paying you taxes so I can run this service. So if you constrain my revenue source, I should sue you. In logically, this is what it should be. Because we just heard from one of the speakers that OTT in Uganda cut off about 5 million people from using the service. And that, of course, constrained the revenue source for the investor. And let's look at this, like Bob was talking about. What motivates a government to tax? Is it raising revenue, or is it because of gossip? If it was gossip for that matter, and you tax social media, people will still speak anyway, they still have the same credit. Because the tax is not on code. Is it on code or is it just on social media? Is it on everything? It's on social media. Which means if people pick phone and call each other, they're not communicating on Facebook and Twitter. They can actually, that goes is even more dangerous. I mean, I would actually tax that than I would tax Facebook. So it's not actually about gossip. It's I think about revenue source, which in my view would be cheating, because you're taxing the investor, and you're taxing the service consumer. In the end, you have to double tax. You're enjoying the revenues from both sides. And by the way, the tax does not go down for the investor because you are taxing the consumer. No. Because the investor is supposed to come up and say, look, I was receiving 3 billion worth of tax in this single year, but because you're not taxing my service consumer, this revenue has gone down. That's not government's narrative. That's not the conversation you want to listen to. It's still that same tax anyway. So you're constraining his revenue source, and at the same time you're charging him. That's cheating. In my view, that would be cheating. So I would advocate for, and that's why I wanted people in this room probably who can, it's very good as seated at the ESC Secretariat. Some of what these discussions should go to the ears that are supposed to listen to them. Don't tell them that I was saying what I was saying because it's easier and this. Make sure that doesn't know because it could. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for those interesting perspectives. Our sister there, you have something to say?
Not new personal contribution, but I'll buy the presentation from the first speaker and the second speaker. If I ask a question, anyone who comes from the revenue authority in any country, for instance, in Tanzania from CRA, is any member from revenue authority? No. So very second that we failed to know, like, why there are lots of disadvantages on digital taxation. So these challenges that we're discussing today, I think the revenue authorities could have an answer on that and take this recommendation, because so far that you see digital taxation brings a lot of disadvantages concerning different human rights, including right of expression and right to work, for instance, I say, on digital aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone, I'll come back to our colleague from Customs and then I will come to the operations. Yes, sir. Please pass the microphone to him.
I just want to clarify one thing. I want to clarify. Revenue authority, they listen to these policies come from tax policy and other policy departments for example. We can address it. Yes, I know the revenue authorities, because they are the ones which collect these taxes, they can guide on personal experience, like what you have said, or according to the estimate was based on wrong parameters. Or they didn't get understand the technical, how technical it was. So if you address these issues, you address tax points and other regulatory.
Thank you very much. You're gracious. We can have the mic here. Please, we need assistance. We are putting our camera lady on overwork.
Thank you. The thing which I wanted actually to contribute has been touched somehow by the last speaker. I wanted to say, I think we should not lament on much on the fact that the revenue authorities are not here. Sometimes things which still needs to be clear and be deliberated. It's nice to be deliberated and be clear, and if they are clear from the stakeholders, that is those who have been affected, they should actually put up, the disadvantages and the advantages, and they put it clear, issues which I think they are recommendation that maybe they be removed or they be worked on. You see, because I'm saying this because I'm actually just coming from the, in Tanzania, the directors of civil organizations normally meet annually. So this year's forum, one of the issues was on the problem with taxation of NGOs and the compliance of NGOs to taxation laws. So issues to discuss and to make maybe a task force. You should not involve TRI, the Tanzania Revenue Authority. You should actually discuss, deliberate, and if possible, make a task force so that at least you go and confront or reach
out TRA, you discuss with them, because if you say you will involve TRA in the discussion, TRA are there to advise the ministry. You see? So even if you actually go to the ministry can come back to TRA for some kind of an assistance or some kind of, advice. So if you have your issues, make sure that your issues are very clear. You put the reason, the advantages and disadvantages, and then you go to the TRA. You say, we have discussed this. We know you are the advisor for the ministry. So this and this and these are the issues. And then the TRA now will go to the ministry, and they tell them that I think from the stakeholders, these are the issues which came about. But if we involve TRA from the beginning of the discussions, actually I think it won't be proper for you to put where you are points and everything. So with this forum, I think it's just okay. If there are no authorities here, it's just okay. So, but we need to come up with some points and maybe to task certain, task force or some kind of stakeholders in here, so that at least they go and consult TRA or the authorities to promote in discussing.
Thank you very much. This is quite interesting. I think I would like to bring this session to a close so that we can take a break for lunch. But before I do that, I think many important issues have been raised on this floor, and it's good that we are in the East African community. It's also good that we do have legal scholars present here, because some of them touch on fundamental rights and policies that need to be interpreted or developed. I had an opportunity to sit in a court session, I think 3 weeks ago, in which a constitutional case was being deliberated on in Kenya. And on one side, I could see the government had chosen the best lawyers in terms of age and experience. And on the other side, there were young lawyers testing the old ones or giving them a run for their money. So in every challenge, there is an opportunity. That's what I'm saying. Most of us may not have heard of the East African Court of Justice, but it's good we can be able to interpret some of the legal challenges that are being discussed here. I believe this is an opportunity to take our legal knowledge beyond the classroom, technology, media, and what else did you say, Walimu? And telecom, an emerging field. On the other hand, there is also an opportunity for a lot of capacity building or literacy, and especially with respect to our policy makers. I'm happy we've had members of the East Africa Legislative Assembly here. I hope that they will be our champions, but we need to do more. As we've heard from our colleague from the customs, they are just implementers. At the end of the day, it is the policy makers that come up with the tax laws. If the policy makers do not understand the issues that we are discussing, they just know how to tax us. They don't understand why they are being taxed. Then it's a real challenge to the development of the East African region. And today we are talking about global big tech, but maybe the reason why we have to rely on big tech from other regions is because we are stifling the potential of even growing our own big tech. So those are some of the things that I am taking from the conversation. I believe that our rapporteurs are doing justice to the report, and will make sure that it reaches the right audience. And at this time, I want to take closing remarks from my panelists who have really done some justice on this subject. So I'll start with Fagani. Your closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My closing remarks, I think I'll just reiterate some of the things that I've already raised. The ICT sector and the digital economy is actually a driver for economic growth. So we should be able to not see it as a cash cow, which is the tendency most of our governments in Africa tend to do. They see this sector, this segment as cash cow and they add taxes upon taxes, but that actually limits the ability of that sector to act as a driver for economic growth. So we should try and, there's a way we should try and change the way we review the sector. We should also ensure that any new taxes that we introduce should be well thought out. So we should actually undertake impact studies to ensure that we understand what these taxes mean, particularly in view of the impact they have on the poorest people in society. And we should also make sure that any taxation is based upon a good understanding of the business models of the people, of the companies, or people that operate in this segment. Because if you don't understand how those people make their money, you might actually be thinking they're making money when they're not. And really, my final remark will be we need to come together to push back against some of these taxes. So when I'm talking about impact studies or understanding the impact of these taxes, so I'm not just talking about new taxes that are coming up or that government is thinking about, but even the old taxes. So the case for Uganda, for instance, that's a good opportunity for us to come together, really demonstrate to government that this tax doesn't work, and hopefully government will be able to appreciate the missed opportunity. Like I mentioned, Uganda, the studies actually show that Uganda might have missed out on about over 2.2% of GDP growth, over 400 billion Ugandan shillings. So we should work together to ensure that these taxes, or core back taxes, are rolled back, but also ensure that any new taxes that are being introduced are well thought out and don't rule out or impact the poorest of society, of our societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Fargani said it very well. Most of the points I wanted to raise in that. And on the part of impact assessment, I think we also need to have communities, internet communities that are strong enough for governments to even feel comfortable to come and consult in case they want to do so. Consult where some experts who could speak up and share because sometimes it's better to check before you take it to the market. And I'll just reiterate, when I look at the market now in East Africa, I think it's time to feed the curve, and then we get time to move. Thank you very much.
Asante sana. My few closing remarks. Reminded of one of your sayings when you were presenting here the day one of the East African School of Internet Governance. You said something like, if you're not on the table, you're in the menu. And I think that is the way to go. Our government should be encouraged to push the boundaries and be on the table in big platforms, with the ITU, and see how to get the money from the people who make it, from Google, from Facebook, from Amazon. Because we are not on the table, we are actually in the menu because they are making money from us. So instead of pursuing a farmer or a journalism student, really devise some ways through the African Union or the EAC or something to voice out your concerns that how are we benefiting from the digital economy worldwide. But secondly, I need also to put it clear that tax is uncertain as death. So you can only avoid it at some extent, but the taxman will certainly catch up on you and you will have to pay. Tanzania is now moving very fast to issuing national IDs and things like that. And the aim of the taxman all over the world is to register everybody so that they know where to go to. So after all this registration, I'm sure some sort of digital taxation will take part. The only advocacy we can do as civil society and academia and researchers is who to tax.
And that brings me to my last point that one size fits all approach to policy making should be avoided really, because it creates absurdity, as the lawyers would say. Sitting there and seeing a poor person in the village being taxed at the same footing as a big global conglomerate, a big company, it really doesn't bring about justice. So policymakers should always try to go for what can be implemented at different levels because we are not equal. There's this principle emanating from climate change arena, where they say common but differentiated responsibilities. We have this common responsibility to contribute or to pay taxes, but our responsibility, our abilities are different and should be treated differently. Asante sana.
Asante Mwalimu. With that, now that I'm with Mwalimu here, I don't know if my other maker is here. We want Pasha. They have informed us, they have educated us, and they have entertained us, isn't it? Yeah, you can all agree. Do we have the other maker? Today he was Rachel. Oh, he's there. Please come. We need to Pasha. Let's be on our feet. Okay, everyone, stand up. We start by Pasha. So Pasha, Thank you very much. All right, so we are breaking for lunch now. Allow me to give our rapporteurs a few minutes to put together the final report. And so I request that we have our lunch and then be seated at 2 o'clock so that we conclude and close this edition of the East African Internet Governance Forum. Is that okay? I don't want to ambush the rapporteurs because they are important issues that we need to hear as outcomes of this meeting. So the rest of you, you are welcome for lunch.
I have one more to make. If you miss one of these, please see me. The notebooks for the East African Internet Governance Forum. I don't have mine. If you don't, raise your hand, please. Okay, good. But
which was it?